Hi everyone, it's Dr. G, and I'm here to talk to you about sociological theories of socialization and socialization and the life course. There are two sociologists that I want to talk about their theories, Charles Horton Cooley and George Herbert Mead. So let's go ahead and start with Charles Horton Cooley and what he entitled his theory, the looking glass self. And Mr. Cooley wondered how human infants develop a self, which he defined as the ability to see ourselves from the outside, to gain a picture of how others see us. He believed that the self is socially created through interaction with others. So there are three steps in his theory, the looking glass self. The first step is that we imagine how we appear to those around us. The second step is that we interpret others' reactions. And the third step is that we develop a self-concept. Based on our interpretations of the reactions of others, we develop feelings and ideas about ourselves. So a couple notes to his theory. Number one, the development of the self does not always depend on accurate evaluations. What does that mean? What we think of ourselves then depends on how we think others see us. So for example, if we think others see us as smart, we think of ourselves the same way. It's really all based on how we see things, our imagination, or how we perceive things to be. We may, for example, perceive that people like us, but reality shows us that they may not like us. What's important here? What is important is how we imagine or perceive things to be. Why? Because our perceptions become our reality. The second important note about this theory is that the development of the self is a lifelong process. All right, it's not something that just occurs up until the age of 12 or 18 or 20. It occurs throughout the entire lifespan. Let's take a look at another sociologist, George Herbert Mead. He founded social behaviorism, and he entitled his theory role-taking. So Mead, like Cooley, was interested in how the self develops. He developed what's called social behaviorism, basically how social experiences develops an individual's personality. So Mead defined the self as the part of an individual's personality composed of self-awareness and self-image. He saw the self as the product of social experience. And so here are some important side notes about the self. Mead said that the self is not there at birth, that it develops. The self develops only with social experience. Social experience is the exchange of symbols. Seeking meaning leads people to imagine other people's intentions. Understanding intention requires imagining the situation from the other's point of view, and by taking the role of the other, we become self-aware. So there are three roles, there are three stages in role-taking according to Mead. The first one is imitation, and imitation is under the age of 3. When young children do not have a sense of self separate from others, and they can only imitate people's gestures and words. Then the second stage in role-taking is what Mead called play. This is from about the age of 3 to 6. This is when children pretend to take the role of specific people, whoever's important to them, like could be a firefighter, it could be an actor, an actress, it could be Superwoman, and it could be a parent. And the third and final stage is called games. Occurs during the early school years. Children can take multiple roles of what's called the generalized other. And the generalized other is basically anyone. All right, so let's wrap this video up with a quick look at socialization through the life course. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of theorists, psychologists like Erik Erikson and both Cooley and Mead will look at how socialization is a lifelong process and not something that simply occurs in the early years of life. All right, so socialization in the life course is the sequence of events that we experience as we journey from birth to death. When you live makes a huge difference for the type of person that you become. All right, so if you and I were born back in the, let's say, 1400s rather than the 1900s and the 2000s, we would be very different people than who we are. We would have been socialized very differently. Where you live also makes a big difference. If you and I were born and raised in India, our social location, we would be very different people than who we are. So here are the different stages in our life course. Childhood is from birth to about the age of 12, and children are very dependent on adults. We then move into what's called adolescence. This is from age 13 to 17. And this is when young people are trying to carve out an identity, trying to define who they are. We then move to young adulthood. This is from age 18 to 29, when we are focused on things like going to college, getting a career or vocation, thinking about getting married. If we get married, do we have children? And how we will plan out the rest of our life. When we hit the middle years, we start to think about stable employment. Do we have stable employment? If we are unhappy in our marriages, should we get a divorce? If we had children, they may be teenagers and working and dealing with teenagers. Do we have economic security to support the family? Finally, we go into the older years. This is ages 65 and above. This is when, if all has gone right economically, people can start to retire. They may have grandchildren. They may be thinking about health and health-related issues. And unfortunately, there may be thoughts about the end of life. All right, so thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you back soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.